Zina. And this is a question people wouldn't ask in the past, right? Because technically every religion prohibits zina. Technically, every major world religion considers this to be immoral. It's just that we live in a time where most people don't follow religion anymore. They follow secular logic. And to the secular mind, zina is not even a sin, it's not even immoral. It's just a normal, fun thing that people do, right? So for people growing up in that world, they're like, why is Islam stopping us from having fun? It's not stopping you from having fun. It's telling you to do it the halal way. Get married, have fun with your spouse. That's what Islam is saying. It's not saying don't have fun. It's saying do it in a way that is dignified and halal and that leads to positive consequences. So last episode, we looked at the benefits of marriage. And what you will find is that the harms of zina are the opposite. In whatever ways that marriage benefits society, in the exact opposite way, zina destroys society. And zina is a destructive force. It causes ripple effects of destruction across every level of society. So, number one, it destroys your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You cannot be pious and living a zina lifestyle at the same time. It's not possible. Maybe a pious person once or twice in their life might have slipped into zina and made tawbah, right? But there the piety came from the tawbah, not from the zina. The zina itself is destructive. When you live a lifestyle of looking at haram and touching haram and indulging in haram, then your iman will decrease. Your relationship with Allah will decrease. Your connection with the masjid will decrease. And this is how we said that marriage protects your religion, zina destroys your religion. Marriage is half of our religion, therefore, zina destroys half of your religion. So be very, very careful there. Number two, zina destroys your honor and your social standing. Just like we said that nikah and marriage is dignified, it protects your izzah, it protects your honor. Zina is the opposite. When a person is known as a fornicator or as an adulteress or as someone who sleeps around, they have the worst reputation in a morally upright, righteous society. And by the way, this is interesting that even though modern society has tried so hard to change this, they can't. They can't change human nature. So over the past 20 years, there has been a lot of propaganda to get people to what they say is stop slut stick shaming, right? Stop shaming people for sleeping around. And what we're seeing happening instead is that people are still disgusted by someone who sleeps around. They are still put off by people who live lifestyles of zina. And modern society can't understand it that they can't get this out of people's minds because it is our fitra, it is our human nature. We are disgusted by people who have no control over their desires. This is human nature, right? So just as someone who gets married and indulges in the halal way, even if they're doing it every single day, it does not affect their honor in any way. Someone who does it in the haram way and people come to know about it, it has very dangerous long-term repercussions on their social standing and honor. And for many, many people, this is the reason why they can't get married. That people know about their past and nobody's willing to look past it to marry them. And we'll come to that a bit in the future slide. The third thing that zina destroys is the family. So as we said, marriage was instituted to preserve lineage, to preserve family, to preserve family ties. Zina is the opposite. Zina has completely destroyed the concept of family in the Western world. There is no family left in the Western world. When you compare Muslim countries to the lands of zina, you can see the difference between people who have families and people who don't. In the Muslim lands, you have the husband and his wives and their children, and you have his parents and the wife's parents, and you have the uncles and the aunts, and everyone's close and everyone's helping each other, and everyone has close relationships with each other. And then when you go to the West, and then you find women raising children by themselves, children who don't even know who their fathers are. You have brother and sister, not two brothers not talking to each other anymore because one slept with the other one's girlfriend, and you have marriages that are broken because the spouses can't stop cheating on each other because they're so used to the zina lifestyle, and it's just an absolute mess. Zina, in of itself, destroys family. It destroys your relationship with Allah, which should be enough for a Muslim to stay away from it. It destroys your honor. It destroys your family. It destroys any sense of trust and honesty. People do not trust the Zani. Nobody trusts a fornicator and adulteress. Nobody trusts them. They are in general considered people who you stay far away from. You don't want to hire them, you don't want to work with them, you definitely don't want to marry them. So it completely destroys trust. And really, in a marriage, if a man or woman cheats on their spouse, it completely destroys the trust in the marriage and it becomes, in many cases, impossible to rebuild, especially when a lot of lying and cheating and deception went into committing the act of zina. And finally, just as marriage gives children a stable environment to grow up in a healthy, happy home, Sina does the opposite. It confuses the lineage, it completely messes up the upbringing and stability of children, and it leads to a generation that does not know uh, what it means to be, what right and wrong is. And this is sad, right? And again, this is just the way the world is. This concept in Islam of waladu zina, the child born from zina, that the child born from zina is generally considered as someone who has a cursed life. Now, a cursed life doesn't mean that they are responsible for the sins of their parents. What it means is that the sins of the child's parents has real world consequences on the child. And for people who are living zina lives, it is something really important to think about. When you engage in zina and a child is born from that zina, there are real world consequences that come from that. They are more likely to become drug addicts. They are more likely to become zanis themselves. They're more likely to become prostitutes. They're more likely to become homeless. They're more likely to have mental health issues because they're not growing up the way Allah intended for children to grow up. They were not produced the way Allah intended for children to be produced. And we are seeing this more than ever in the modern world because of the zina culture of the West. Finally, zina is haram because it reduces human beings to animals who have no control over their desires. People who prioritize immediate gratification over long term goals and ideals. There is absolutely no good that comes out of zina except temporary pleasure, and that pleasure is usually followed by years of pain and regret. And the thing is, the temporary pleasure you get from zina, you can't get the exact same pleasure out of marriage. So it makes no sense to trade pleasure plus all the benefits of marriage for pleasure plus all the pains and destruction of zina. Zina is an animal act. It is reducing yourself to the most animalistic version of yourself. It is a sign that you have no self-control. It is a trade-off of all the good in your life for a moment of evil. And the other destructive aspects of zina I didn't even mention yet. The STDs, sexually transmitted diseases. You get a lifelong STD from zina, nothing's going to change that. It's there for life. That's a permanent effect of zina on your life. So be very, very careful. Zina is evil. It is immoral and an evil way. And these are some of the harms of zina. Now, what happened to the modern world then? Right, this is something many young people don't realize. This world we're living in today, where zina is normalized, this is very new. Very new. It started just 60 years ago in the 1960s. Right until the 1960s, wherever you went in the world, marriage was the norm and zina was looked down upon and frowned upon in every culture and religion. Zina is technically something that is haram in Christianity, in Judaism, in Hinduism, in any religion. And it was something that all cultures and all societies frowned upon until the 1960s. So between the 1960s and 1980s, the Western world went through a series of sexual revolutions. And these sexual revolutions coincided with feminism and the rise of the LGBTQ movement. And these three things worked together to break up the family and to normalize zina. And essentially, what would the the main ideas behind the sexual revolution was that this doesn't seem like something that's really bad. Right? You see, society had reached a level where people began to see morality as something that doesn't have any divine basis. Therefore, we decide what's moral and immoral. And some people looked around and said, "This looks fun. I don't see the harm in it." So they began to start a movement to normalize it. They say, "Hold on, why can't we just do this? We can have all the fun without the responsibilities of marriage." That's really what it is, all the fun without the responsibilities of marriage. And the feminist movement joined in on this and was a very important part of the sexual revolution because marriage is the opposite of feminism, right? Marriage is this social structure where the man is the head of the household and the wife has to obey the husband, and she has to raise the children. Now, for the feminists to live the lifestyle they want of committing zina and being their own boss and not needing a man, they needed to completely destroy the concept of family. So they also played an important role in normalizing zina and being part of the sexual revolution. So it started in the 60s, and by the 90s, it was normal. By the 90s, zina was completely normal in the non Muslim world, and they began to export this to the Muslim world as well, trying to change our cultures as well. And so, what happened then was we now had about two generations raised in a world where zina is normalized. And now we are seeing the harms of it. So, it's interesting that in the 90s, if we asked our teachers why zina is haram, they could mention what the Quran and Sunnah had to say, but they couldn't bring us statistics to show us that, listen, this is a society that indulges in zina and see what it has caused. They couldn't bring as much statistics. But now, 20 years later, we can just show all of the statistics of how the sexual revolution has completely destroyed the Western world. That really, uh, if you look at, for example, the USA, I truly believe if the sexual revolution never happened, the USA would still be in its golden age. But what this did is it destroyed people's motivation to work. It destroyed people's happiness. It destroyed families. And all of this contributed to the decline of the United States as a nation. That we now have a nation where there's lots of drug addicts, lots of children who don't know who their fathers are, lots of unhappiness, lots of suicide, lots of depression. We have these kids growing up without fathers, without any uh, psychological stability, going to school and shooting other kids. Really, it's all linked. All of it is linked. So from the fallout of the sexual revolution, that we can look back now 30 years and say, okay, zina is haram, and here we can see a case study where people made zina normal, and this is what happened. Number one, decrease in marriage. Marriage is on the decline in the West. Many non-Muslims just don't get married ever, right? And sadly, we're starting to see this amongst Muslims in the West as well. Number two, an increase in divorce. Divorce rates have skyrocketed from 10% to 50%, in some countries, even 60%. That people who have these options to sleep around and do whatever they want with whomever they want don't see a reason to stay in a marriage once it gets boring. And so divorce has become normalized. Number three, a decrease in birth rates. Now, a decrease in birth rates, there's many contributing factors to this. Number one, the rise of contraception, right? That women don't have to have children like in the past, they have options. Number two, abortion. A lot of women are just committing zina and then killing their babies. Um, Number three, homosexuality. Lots of people are gay, so they don't have children. Um, Number four, pornography. A lot of men are watching pornography, and so they're not actually having sex with their wives, and so they're not actually having children. So all of this is contributing to a decrease in birth rates. And what's happening now is there's actually a genuine worry about society dying out in certain countries. That some countries are worried about their people dying out. They are not producing enough children to replace the older generation. And this is the results of zina. They are literally imploding their own society by normalizing zina. Because what happens, for example, in the Muslim world, a man and woman get married, they have five, six, seven, maybe even 10 children, right? Those children grow up, they get married, same thing. And we keep growing exponentially. But in the West, the opposite is happening, right? A couple decide to have two children. Those two children, one ends up gay, the other decides they don't want to have any children. Lineage is over, the family doesn't exist anymore. And this is exactly what's happening for millions of families across the West. Another Fallout from the sexual revolution is confusion about lineage. Many people in the West don't know who their fathers are, don't know who their relatives are, and there are many stories coming out now where a man and a woman will be engaged with each other in zina, might even get married to each other, and then they do a DNA test and learn that they have the same father. Right? Absolute madness. Something like that would never happen in a world where zina is treated as the evil that it is. Then they are the psychological impacts of zina that people don't talk about enough. The unhappiness, the heartbreak, the depression, the breaking of trust, suicide. All of this is linked to zina. How many people have committed zina? How many people have committed suicide because of a breakup? How many people are unhappy because their spouse is cheating on them? How many people are going through depression, because they feel faulty inside because of the lifestyle that they have lived? All of this is linked. Really, the sexual revolution did not free the West, it destroyed the West. And Muslims need to learn from this. Many young Muslims look at this and say, I want to be like them. I want to be free. I want to enjoy my life. Real enjoyment comes from obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anything that Allah has prohibited, there are consequences to it. And now we are seeing the consequences of an entire society embracing zina. And we ask Allah to protect us from this, and we ask Allah to guide us away from this and to allow our youth to understand why this is evil. Now, Alhamdulillah, one of the benefits of all this madness happening in the West is that more and more people are turning to Islam. People now see Islam as the last religion that is holding firm to its principles. People now see Islam as the last religion that promotes marriage and prohibits fornication and still has traditional marriages where the men are happy, the women are happy, the children are happy. They want that for themselves and they are converting to Islam. So this is, a bigger loss to the West and a bigger benefit to Western Islam, right? Because really, what's going to happen then is these lands will end up becoming Islamic lands over time because they're not having enough children, we having many children, and then some people from their side end up converting to Islam and having many children. So eventually, Islam will dominate these lands. And by the way, they are genuinely afraid of that. They are genuinely afraid of Islam dominating their lands because Muslims are having too many children. Well, the solution to that get married and have your own children, but they don't want to do it because they are so caught up in following their nafs.